to Cassette Connection, the podcast where we discuss music and meaning with the people who make it. My name is Ben, and with me is Alex.
This episode, we speak to three-quarters of the Sydney band Snape. Formed in 2015, Snape are a four-piece band that write, record and perform shoegaze-inspired pop songs.
The band tells us about the writing process for their latest album, Undone, and how it differed from their first record. We talk about the ideas expressed within the album and what the recording process was like for the group. Camilo, Emma and Jimmy tell us about how they each write for the group, along with how they forged the sound of Snape.
Here it is.
My name's Camilo, and I play guitar and sing in Snape.
My name's Emma. I play keyboard and sometimes sing in Snape.
I'm Jimmy. I play the drums and I don't sing in Snape.
Every time I search for answers, I find them formed under my tread. I search for hours trying to find.
It started off as a solo project, and it was kind of it was my attempt to try and get away from kind of writing just punk and hardcore. And that really, really quickly became old, and I figured that I'd want to get pretty loud pretty quickly. So I started recruiting people, and probably within 6 months we had a lineup going. So that was around 2015. And back then it was just me, Emma, and our friend Luke playing drums. And he was in the band for how long, Em?
18 months or so?
Yeah, right. He moved to Queensland anyway. So then we had another drummer who was in the band for a little while. And then Jimmy came in around about 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
And then since then... we released an album in that time, Always, which was well received, I guess, and we played a bunch of cool shows and we toured on it, and it was an accomplishment in itself because it was, the first time that any of us had recorded an album, and we went up to Newcastle, and that was actually a really cool time recording it and then getting it mixed and everything, and it came out how we wanted it at the time, but then since then, and then since James came into the band, we kind of, Jimmy, we kind of started to expand how we were approaching the songwriting and how we were approaching just like the band itself, I guess, and just how we carried ourselves and what we were trying to achieve, I suppose. And that's kind of how Undone came about, and we spent like that time writing that album, and we're just so glad to finally have it out there. It's been a long ride.
How did you come into contact with the other members? How did you recruit them?
So I put up all these flyers around so Emma's my partner. So that was an easy win for me because she's an incredibly talented pianist, and I wanted to I wanted to make sure that the sound was really bold and really deep, and at the time a synth seemed like a really good idea. So we went for that, and I'm really glad, because it's like probably the one thing that when people listen to Snape, they're like, oh yeah, that's Snape, because it's there's that keys tone. So that was good. And then at the time, Luke was a friend of some other mates that were in bands. So and it was all kind of, I mean, even how I met Emma was all kind of surrounding that Blackwire crowd, you know. So the Blackwire Records venue that was around for quite a while in the 2010s. So that was where I met all those people. And to be fair, all the people that have joined the band since then, apart from James, who is Emma's brother. So that was another easy win, actually. But Aaron, we met through the same people. So it was more just a matter of trying to find like-minded people who were interested in making music and wanted to express themselves and try and do something unique, I guess, or just not necessarily too on the nose. And then Jimmy was kind of like a late ring-in.
Emma and I played in a band before. Yeah, and Emma and I played in a band before Snape, and we just kind of get each other and really understand each other musically. And when I first heard the first record, Always, I just thought it was fantastic. So I just had to get in there.
And it was right before we did our launch show for the first album that Jimmy joined. It was a crazy 3 weeks of him learning all the songs and us like rehearsing whenever we could.
Yeah.
Worked out really well though.
I find them formed under my tread. I search for hours trying to find a place to hang my head. I wasn't scared.
So Emma and I we'd always played music together kind of growing up from teenagers and stuff. So we would always play with each other, like Radiohead covers, and just have a really fun time doing that in the dark. And then I was in a band, Mascane, and it just needed, some more melodies. And we got Emma in, and she was just a shoo-in, and she did such a good job. And we had a really good time just writing original music a lot. And it was just great. And then obviously Emma became partners with Cam. I got to know Cam, who's an awesome dude, and I just really love the influences of both of them and how they kind of interact in the band. So I kind of like what both of Cam and Emma like as well, so it just worked really well.
Yeah.
And then I heard Always, got the opportunity and jumped in, and it just felt fantastic.
So I grew up learning classical piano since I was about 7, I think. As Jimmy just said, we both had a love for the same types of bands, same kind of music, and we just started playing together when we were kids. And obviously that love of playing together has never gone away. And I guess for me with Snape, I really like the opportunity to get to create that kind of atmosphere. And one of my favorite bands is The Cure, so I'm just all about those cut through synth pop, 80s pop melodies, and I like to do that in the band.
So Mascane were more like
Surf rock.
yeah, like surf rock. Yeah, surf rock with metal drums is a great way to put it, actually, Jimmy. I went to some Mascane shows it was just incredible to behold. I remember one show that we saw. It was at Lazy Bones? I think it was at Lazy Bones. Right after Mascane played, there was this collective of maybe 6 or 7 people who all clearly just went to the con together and just really wanted to get a jam band on a stage. And I remember they played for probably like 90 minutes, and it just was incredible to see like these 3 dudes just wank for 90 minutes in front of all these people. It was outstanding. And then Emma, you're in Mascarnet. Were you in any other bands apart from that?
No, just like all of the rock bands at school.
Right. I was just in punk and hardcore bands. I was in this band called Yo Put That Bag Back On when I was in my early 20s. That was just like a title fight worship band. And before that, there was a band called Everest that was just like Jungle Fever style hardcore. And yeah, Snape was meant to be a reaction to all of that. Just like fucking my mind and body for like 3 years, just playing 5 shows a week. Maybe that's a bit of an overstatement, but it felt like that at times. Snape is a lot more about, as fucking ridiculous and wanky as this sounds, Snape is way more about the music itself rather than the grind, I think. Like
and the full like show experience, like I mean, just in that kind of punk time. You guys are probably, Everest were probably a bit around before we started like playing in Sydney and that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah, that was
when our punk bands
that was
were
like 2009, 10.
Yeah, that was ages
heading
ago.
around. So
The Lansdowne days.
Yeah.
Lansdowne, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. When it still smelled like piss all the time.
Carrying that over, did you take much influence of it into Snape, like in terms of like playing style and that kind of thing, or was it completely like I'm done with hardcore, I'm gonna play rock now?
You know, that was definitely the plan, was to do that. And then I remember it was probably like last year we played this show out in Para that our friend Pete from Beat Disc curated, and another friend of ours, Tom, who works at Beat Disc, put it to me like this, because he hadn't seen us that many times, or he hadn't seen us play our new songs at that point. And he goes, "You know what, Camilo? When I hear you play guitar, like Snape might be its own thing, but you are always just playing title fight riffs, no matter what you're doing." And I'm like, "Shut the hell up, man! I'm trying really hard not to do that anymore." But I inevitably do fall back on those classic tropes. And I think one thing with Undone is that I tried to embrace that a bit. Whereas on the first album, I was really fighting that, and that's probably why it's so like dense and slow.
I tried to move on. It didn't matter It took too long to get over and through. I tried to move on. It didn't matter when. It took too long.
My favorite way to put it is that I decided to share the load and stop being so selfish when it came to writing songs. And that's where I'll let Emma take over, because she and James and Aaron all equally actually all made such a huge difference. Do you want to?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest part that I keep forgetting is when we wrote Always, it was still while we were forming the band. So there were different people's perspectives at different times, and it was written over such a long period. Whereas Undone, we had our 4 core beautiful people, and we just kind of smashed it out, and we were really consistent, and we just found a really good way of communicating with each other and figuring out the best parts and the things that are good but just not suited for this time or this song. and Undone was born.
Yeah, there was one point where we wrote a song and we were going to can it. It was one of the first ones we wrote, and then I split it in half, and it became two of my favorite songs on the album. One thing I really enjoyed about this album in particular was the just like the process of actually having a connection between rhythm and melody, and being able to discuss what we were trying to achieve as a unit, as opposed to trying to put something to something else. And Jimmy's such a good drummer. He recorded the album in 2 days, you know, and he just laid down those 10 songs like it was nothing. And what was that like? Because that seems pretty hectic.
I mean, it's such a good experience with the recording as well. Like, Lachlan did an awesome job, and I just love the sound that he captured. He really understood what we were going for as well. Just making the drums sound so big and thick, which is exactly what I was going for. And as Cam and Emma already touched on, just the way the drums kind of interact with everything, kind of being a really strong presence, but not kind of overpowering everything. And
like there's a few really subtle things that I really like that are kind of spread throughout. That you did that I hadn't actually noticed until I listened to it recently, because I hadn't listened to it in freaking ages. And then when we put it out, I was like, I'll give it a listen on release day. And there's just heaps to get into with the drums.
Yeah, and I mean, the good thing about doing the recordings as well is we played it live, or they played it live for me while I did the drums. So had the energy there, could see Cam and Emma behind the screen while everyone was in the room, but we're all playing at the same time. And I think that's really important to kind of get that energy happening. And
that kind of speaks to how we write as well, because sorry, we totally got off topic there, but the fact that like the reason we played live like that is because that's really, really a reflection of the approach we took to writing the album from beginning to end. There wasn't really a time where I'd go away and maybe write a song like start to finish and then bring it in, and then even if we cut it up and stuff, like that didn't happen once. All the riffs and everything kind of came. Maybe some riffs I'd work on at home, but I wouldn't really come in with an idea for a song. It wasn't until after those initial sessions that we wrote it that I would go away and listen to the demos we recorded on our phone or whatever, and play it on guitar and sing it however I thought the phrasing would go or whatever, and then maybe then bring that to everyone. But it never started like that. Whereas the first album, really, all the songs pretty much started like that. They were all pretty much me just writing a song at home and being like, all right, let's all play this together now and see how it sounds. And then we'd kind of go from there.
And I think there are a lot of different tracks on the new album that have been written differently or started from a different idea instrumentally, which kind of gives it a bit of variation, but still being quite cohesive.
So originally you were writing the songs, you're coming to the band, well, the band was still kind of semi-forming, and just being like, here, play this with me. How was it for you, Cam, in terms of writing kind of on the spot, I guess? Were you all starting instrumentally and then working out things later, or?
Yeah, pretty much. There was only really one or two times where I'd do like a Jack Johnson type singer-songwriter, you know, playing guitar and singing at the same time. And then my plan was to do something really soft and subtle like that, and then just add heaps and heaps of distortion and drums and synth to it. I only ended up doing that once, which was stupid in hindsight, because that was probably my favorite song on the album. Devoured. I don't know if you have heard that one, but
Yes.
The rest of them were, spot on. Like what you said, is they were just basically instrumentals, and then I tried to add words to. And funnily enough, there was a song on that album called Prince's Lament that I could not work out how to put words to it. So we just had to keep it an instrumental because we didn't want to write another song.
So were you stuck on like getting like a 40 minutes to complete the album experience?
Some bullshit like that. I was just like, it's got to be 10 songs. It's got to be proper amount of music. It's such an old way of thinking about putting out music. But I was just very much stuck in that cycle because I'd only ever been in bands that released 7 inches and EPs and stuff like that.
So are you the only lyricist in the band, Cam, or is that spread out as well?
It definitely has spread out a bit. Most of what Erin sings on her own, she wrote. Actually, no, everything that Erin wrote on her own, she wrote, because it's just that one song, right?
I think so.
Yeah. There were a few lines added here and there from other people. Like Emma finished off "Took Too Long." But yeah, most of the time I'm just writing the lyrics myself, which is you could probably hear that just because I tend to repeat words a lot. And I really took note of that. Yeah, I really took note of that on this record, even more than the last one, because the last one had it a bunch as well. And then there are heaps that are repeated from the last record as well. I just got lazy, or like subconsciously lazy. It's like I got to a point where I thought the meaning was there, and then I just decided to make it work or something. I think for the most part it probably does what I want it to do, but I definitely have clocked that now that I need to stop doing that.
It's so hard to find a better place to hide. It's so hard to see.
What we were going more than anything was a vibe. So I think we really set early on what we wanted the album to sound like in terms of the mood and the timbre. The first song we wrote was "You Say," and that really, when we wrote that, we were like, okay, sweet. This is kind of, we want to spread out from here, but we want to keep it at this kind of level. And the lyrics, I always get a bit weird with lyrics. I tend to do this thing when I'm writing the melodies, where I'll just say words while I'm playing guitar. So it won't necessarily be like, it won't necessarily be moaning or like humming or anything like that. I'll usually just chuck out random words that come to me to help with the phrasing, because that helps me work out the phrasing as well. And then I tend to get stuck on those phrases that I come up with when I'm doing it because they feel organic. And so usually I'll use that as a starting point and then work out from there, right? And it's rarely that I'll try and diverge from that too much to add any meaning beyond what maybe the song's bringing out in the moment. Yeah. And so, but it always subconsciously, I think something always comes out and links all of the different ideas, even if it's not necessarily me actively trying to represent those ideas. Which is interesting with Undone, because it wasn't really until it was all finished and we'd done pre-pro and we were working on the artwork and I looked back on it that I realized it was really about how I related to my mother growing up, or not even just her, but just kind of like my whole familial structure and how that played a role in, I don't know, I guess what I do now, what I kind of, how I behave, for lack of a better term. I don't really know how to articulate that properly.
No, it's good. It's all that kind of subconscious stuff that it tends to appear when you're just kind of sitting there.
Yeah, and like the perfect, one of my favorite moments on the record And the moment where I feel like that converges perfectly is when Erin's brought these beautiful words and this beautiful like piece to Space to Grieve, where we kind of play off each other in the first part of the song. And she wrote that independently. But then when you listen to the song as a whole, it seems like the two voices are kind of playing off each other, like calling and responding to each other in a way that we just didn't really plan properly, and it came out like that, and we were like, oh sweet, we landed on it. But it wasn't necessarily something that we expected, and definitely not thematically. Like, it works in terms of our voices and stuff, but lyrically it worked out like way more than I expected it to. It was definitely nothing I'd ever done before, to be honest. Because just to keep reiterating over and over again, but all the hardcore bands I was in, we just did everything in my garage or wherever we were at the time, you know? And I mean, we did go into a studio, but rarely was it ever the point of the band. So I kind of decided to try and do it as close to properly as what I thought that was. So I just got a list of people and just basically asked to meet them and see their studio. And Lachlan ended up being the person who convinced me that they had the most interest in the project, but also that had like the best space. That, because one thing that I learned from recording a bunch of times, kind of more in a more DIY way, you know, at homes and stuff, is that if you can find a really good space and get a really good vibe, then the performances just come more naturally, and you don't have to maybe force it as much. And that really helps. That really helped us, because we were able to do it in 5 days. So when I met Lachlan and he showed me his space, and he's just he's an old punk guy, and he was in a metal band called Nazul that was really big, and he recorded a bunch of cool hardcore bands like Phantoms, and he's done the Hard-Ons, and so he's done heaps of bands that have kind of come from the same place that we have, in terms of the approach to music and the style and all that stuff. So it kind of like I met him second, and as soon as I met him, I was like, shit, do I have to go meet this third person? And I did, or the fourth or whatever it was, but I did because, you know, I'd made this plan. But he was definitely, and he was recommended as well by a friend of mine, Dave Drayton from Pinch Hitter and Zounds fame. So he, it just clicked straight away, and the place, his studio is so good.
What was the tracking process like? If it was over the 5 days, was it like consecutive 5 days? Just get in there, like you said, did the drums and bass first, I assume, and then tracked everything individually after that?
Yeah, I think we started with drums and bass at the same time for the first 2 days. And then we kind of had that awesome board. I'm not sure if you saw that on Instagram. We made this giant Snape board with Alan Rickman heads. And we kind of just literally mapped out every single track we had to do, and put a head on it once it was complete, which was
a pre-pro. That's right.
Yeah, and we pre-pro'd as well. So we ended up doing that and just systematically chipped away at it. And it was just a really good experience with Lachlan being such a good engineer and giving really great feedback and shaping certain sounds in the songs. And so I think it was drums and bass for the first 2 days. Then was it guitar or keys after that?
It was a bit guitars but a bunch of keys, I think. Yeah. And then it kind of got spread out, where the plan had been to do a full day of guitars. And then we finished something early, I think on the third day. So it must have been keys then, yeah.
But Lachlan
we did a bunch of bass drop-ins.
Lachlan was very good at kind of reading the room and knowing when maybe we needed a break from something and suggesting something else, and just kept it really productive all the time.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily how we'd planned to be super systematic in terms of the one instrument at a time thing.
It's funny. It's a funny process because it's like we did something very similar in terms of like using, kind of like 4 days and then just get in and just pound it out basically. And it's like, yeah, I guess when you're not really afforded all the time in the world, all the luxuries in the world, you've got to kind of work to those restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was literally the last 5 minutes of the Friday of 5th day. Cam was still recording the final piece of guitar. We like used every inch of those 5 days.
Yeah.
And Lachlan was really nice about us going over a couple of days, by like 15 minutes or something like that. But it was, I think he was really happy to just let us get what we needed done, and that was kind of what we're doing at the end was adding acoustic guitar actually, and that had always been a plan. But we'd run out of time, and thankfully we were able to squeeze it in. But yeah, the definitely economic 5 days was pretty hectic. I mean, we prepared really, really well though. That was one thing going into recording this one that we took a lot more seriously, because on the first album we kind of booked in recording when we were 8.5 songs in, and kind of forced ourselves to finish the last couple of songs on the album. Whereas this time we spent like a year writing it, and then we did a full 2 or 3 days of pre-pro where we tried to record it how we would record it in the studio, so we did a live recording of the bass and the drums and the keys, and I'd done a backing track on guitar to a click, and then we did that, and then I mixed it and kind of put it together how we thought it should sound, so that we could make up the board that Jimmy was talking about, and also just get an idea of what needed to go in it, what else needed to go in it, And then, I had lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, we're really prepared, right? So then before we went into the studio, kind of like the week before, we just rehearsed to the click over the PA without vocals, to try and like really get into the precision of it. Which it was fun. Funnily enough, a couple of songs we ended up doing without a click, which I thought was Lachlan kind of made that call, and it paid off in the end, I think. But yeah, that kind of, even I remember this one funny. We were coming up with the final BPMs for the click tracks for the recording after we'd done pre-pro, and I can't remember which song it was, but I changed it by 1 BPM. And we played it, and I remember I think it was Aaron. You were giving me shit for it. Aaron was giving me shit for it. And what's it gonna do? And so I put it on, and we played it, and it was like, holy shit, that's the best it sounded since we did pre-pro. And was that actually just 1 BPM? Aaron looked at me, and I was like, hey, you got to give me. But it totally. So that was kind of the minutia of what we were trying to when we were trying to prepare. Because it wasn't cheap, it was a pretty expensive process. But we kind of made up for it by doing it in 5 days and still getting the quality and the gear and like Lachlan's knowledge and Lachlan's, management of us as performers and of our time and everything. So it definitely worked out in the end. But I think like due credit to us, like playing to a click over a PA is shit. Like it's not fun. It's just work, So I was I felt like a total asshole making them do it, but it totally worked out in the end. Like we had to double, kind of start from basics and then double up to try and get them to sound as good live as they did how he recorded them. Because we did it. We played them a certain way, and we played them a couple of times at shows. I remember towards the end of last year, we played a show where we just played the album start to finish, and that was really fun. Just to kind of see how it sat. But yeah, it's crazy how much you have to work, even just at practice after you've recorded it, because and not just in the recording process, I mean, because in the recording process is a nightmare, because the last thing I need to do is think more deeply about what I'm playing on guitar, especially. Yeah, I don't know. What's it like on keys, Em?
Yeah, I mean, I could put layers and layers and layers of synth if you'd let me, but I also I do think about that playing it live aspect and how much can I handle, because I'd like to encapsulate everything that we record into a live performance. So this recording process has actually encouraged me to expand my horizons in that way, to be able to do more live with synth, which is really exciting.
It's so hard to find a better place to hide.
Yeah, I guess that goes to then the kind of production side of the album. In terms of like you're saying, you could put anything on it. You could put 5 guitar tracks plus acoustic guitar plus extra synths. But then how are you gonna reproduce that in a live setting?
I probably on the board. It's behind me now. I can see now. I'll count them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different columns for guitar for every song.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how we did the pre-pro, planning to make it this huge, messy thing. And just the beauty of recording in a space like that is that the gear is just so good and so precise, and the room is so beautiful and so well treated that you don't need 6 layers. You can get away with even just 1 or 2. Like, we ended up using 2 layers of guitar for most of the songs. Because then you're not necessarily filling up the space as much, and it lets... because the gear we were using and because of the amount of time we spent pulling the tone, it kind of meant that filled out naturally, and it let the space songer breathe more, so you could hear the drums and the keys and the bass all really kicking through, which is something that I think always kind of lost a bit, is just the dynamism of what you can achieve with those instruments, because it's easy. I mean, like you guys know, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about with Lost Coast, that you're trying to really explore the whole spectrum of what those instruments together can accomplish, as opposed to just, everyone playing at the same time to the same beat to try and, ride a vibe or whatever. Not that I'm criticizing that at all, because I fucking love that music, that's pretty much all I listen to. But, but just that process is... so much more enabled when we're in a space like that, rather than because I mean, six layers in pre-pro, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Was nowhere to be seen. All I wanted was to
It was great. It was done over 4 days. I think ended up being 4 days. And the first couple of days, Lachlan just kind of got in there and did his thing. And then I went in for the last couple of days, not to supervise, but just to enjoy, to watch him, or just to watch him do it even, because I actually ended up learning so much about mixing and recording, just watching him work, because he's such a pro, and he works with really, really good people as well. He had a bunch of assistants and interns there who assisted throughout the process, and they were all really cool. Actually, one of them I ended up recruiting for my football team as well. And he was one of our best players. I always get distracted by football. It's so stupid.
Mixing.
Yeah. So it was crazy to see. There was one point I remember, I can't remember if you were there for that, Jimmy, because Jimmy came on the last day as well, and he was there to supervise how his drum sounded. It was so good. He came back on I think it was the 3rd day, or no, it was the 4th day. You were there. Maybe it was before you came though, because he come in on the 4th day and he's like, man, I just figured out the problem with the guitars, because we've been having a problem getting some of the guitars to pop through. And he's like, I just tweaked these three frequencies by 1 freaking hertz, and it just everything popped. So he had to go through all the songs again and like almost balance them out again because of just this massive discovery that we kind of like broke through on the third day. And it was just crazy to see him work, and like especially for the drum. Do you remember that last day, or when did you come in when we were sorting out the drums? Because there were a couple of little things. That was the thing. We like, even though we only had 4 days, we were like, on the 3rd minute, 20th second, 30th microsecond. It sounds like the tom is catching the snare trigger. So can we figure that out? You know, like we got into the minutiae of it, like a bit. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty hectic, but it was definitely an interesting experience.
So I guess then, talking about the tone of some of the songs, for me, I don't want to use the term like Australiana or anything like that, but sometimes it feels like you're kind of on the cusp of that kind of late 80s, 90s Australian kind of pub rocky sound with the guitars especially.
Yeah, it really almost came down to me trying to strip it back so I didn't have to be as busy when I played it live, you know. One thing I was really trying to do was get to a point where I could use the same tone for all the songs and it would be okay, and then maybe I could turn on a fuzz pedal and turn it off, but for the most part I can just set my pedal board up at the start of the show and be good to go. And it wasn't actually even until recently that I sat down for like 2 hours with a friend, and we went through all my pedals and we like pulled all different tones for all the different songs and how I wanted them to sound, and kind of even pulled a couple of pedals off my board that just didn't need to be there. And I really did not plan for it to sound like 80s or 90s pub rock. But yeah, I totally actually haven't even clocked that until you mentioned it. And I'm thinking like Screaming Jets is like that exact tone, which is funny.
Yeah. I think it is that clean guitar sound.
Yeah.
That, like plus the chorus, it just feels like, I don't know, like a Midnight Oil song or something.
Yeah, that's sick.
But then you've got that dichotomy where you've got that sound and then you've got the heavier sound, which is kind of more similar to that 80s sound, or maybe even that kind of new wave revival and like that Title Fighty kind of Tiger's Jaw-esque sound.
Actually what complements my deep desire to still always rip off those bands when I'm writing songs is Jimmy's drumming, because Jimmy's a metal guy. Like you play metal, right? You played metal when you were in high school and shit like that. And so just having someone who's technically astute to be able to just to experiment with how that can play off a bit more of a strip back approach, you know, was really interesting.
Steered away from the organ tone of Always, which I kind of was already doing by the end of the writing of Always.
Yeah, it was always me being like, oh, Emma, you know, this song could probably benefit from a bit of organ. And that was all that was the first piece.
Maybe I was always trying to break free from the organ. But I do love the organ still. So yeah, I think it also, when we first started writing with Snape, we didn't have someone playing bass, and the idea was for the synth to kind of fill that low end. But then when we got Erin in, I kind of didn't need to fill that space anymore, so I was looking for a different space to fill. and settled right in that top end. And that's where I'm living now.
Even though Erin's not around, I might ask the question anyway. Circling back to kind of like the conceptual stuff for the record. Erin does the visual work, right?
Yeah.
What's it like for her? I guess you can't really speak on her behalf, but I guess what's it like? Are you telling her like this is the kind of thing we want, or is she just kind of coming up with it on her own?
She kind of made a folder on Google Drive that was
like a mood
like
board.
a mood board folder, and then we all just kind of grabbed random images that we just liked or that we thought the album kind of. Yeah, I mean, we all came back with, it was really weird. We actually all came back with like the same shit. We all came back with like water and wavy and dark, super dark.
Yeah. It's interesting that we really all did have a strong, similar idea on the imagery for this album.
And then basically one of the pure joys of having someone as talented as Erin in the band is that, I mean, first of all, we get a bunch of artwork that is of the highest quality for probably the lowest you'll ever pay for it. And also she because we've known each other for so long now, she can kind of look at that mood board and go away and be like, all right, I'm going to figure something out. And just like with Always, she kind of brought something to the table that we liked, but wasn't necessarily exactly what we were looking for. And then like 6 hours later, she's like, all right, here it is. And that's pretty much what you saw, to be honest. Yeah. She's just an absolute weapon like that. I certainly try not to be too demanding when it comes to the artwork, because I realize that Erin's doing it, you know, because she's in the band and stuff. But I always do end up doing that, which is bad.
Yeah, well, basically we just lucked out getting Erin in the band because she's just amazing, and yeah, she works very hard on these art pieces and they're all really amazing.
Especially because of how technology has advanced and how we're able to now, you know, literally plug in a small metal box and have 2 microphone inputs. It's great that we've been able to kind of utilize the skills we've gained being in DIY bands and playing shows where you have to set up all the gear and you have to manage all the sound gear, and then you have to, you know, like any demos and stuff you're doing at home with whatever equipment you have available. I guess learning all that stuff really means that we were able to prepare really, really well for recording the album, which then meant that we were able to do it in 5 days recording and 4 days mixing. Yeah. In the past, we've just done everything ourselves. Like our first release that we did ourselves. And it wasn't great, but, you know, it was a thing. And then just being able to also just manage all the other stuff that comes along with being in a band, you know, like booking venues and like making poster art and all that admin stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think about. Even just like having like Jimmy's employers put up our rehearsal space, you know what I mean? So it's like we all kind of have all these people and this community around us that really enables us to be able to do what we do, because, you know, we all work full time or some version of that, and we don't. It's not necessarily about time, but like even so, it's not like we have the resources to be able to spend a whole bunch of money every week to rehearse, you know. So without the rehearsal space we have, we'd be suffering, I think, and it would be a lot more difficult to do what we'd like to rehearse and to play shows and to do whatever. So even just that is a perfect example of how we've been able to streamline our recording process and all of that stuff, because we've been able to kind of, how do I say it? We've been able to, I don't want to say take advantage, because that sounds really...
Utilize?
Yeah, utilize is right, but it's even that sounds a bit like,
Yeah.
why are you coming over here and utilize my shit? I mean more that thanks to the people we've been able to surround ourselves with, we've been able to learn from them how to be able to be self-efficient. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Like I draw a lot of my inspiration in how we approach this from Erin, who's like, you know, a DIY artist, and she's putting up, you know, a bunch of money to broadcast her art to the world. And she's like, you know, contributing a lot of time and a lot of energy to create stuff. But it's her approach, and it's conversations I've had with her about what DIY means that has helped me, at least. And by I guess by extension, Snape, to be able to manage ourselves in that and hold ourselves in that way, you know, without necessarily relying on money, I guess. Like, because of that, we're able to spend a whole bunch of money on recording it, which is why it sounds so good, to be honest. Like, the performances have literally nothing to do with it. Lachlan was an absolute like wizard in that mixing booth.
Yeah. And I think as well, it just helps a lot that we all like each other a lot and and like the music a lot. So we're very proactive about, you know, making it happen and making what we're creating get out there and be something real. And, you know, Camilo loves giving everyone homework tasks every week. And, and, you know, Erin brings so much to the band. Everyone just brings something really unique and wonderful to the band to be able to create.
Yeah. Well, I guess the initial word that comes to mind when we talk about DIY every time is just family, and everything that Camilo and Jimmy has just said has encapsulated that for me as well.
Said all I found something that erased me on the low. What am I?
Really, I mean, the album sounds fantastic, just like from a sound perspective, but we're always playing very loud and big, you know, when we rehearse every week in the room. And we try and always encapsulate that on the stage as well, just making a really big sound that's trying to be bigger than us, and just really put the performance out there and just doing the songs justice that we've created. So it's not so much about trying to match the album sound, even though that has kind of given us something to work towards, but we've always kind of envisioned having a big sound like the album has given us to put on the stage.
Yeah, and I think it also playing live, even though we've got this really beautiful, polished version of all the songs, it's a nice opportunity to try other things as well. And we, one thing that I like to look at when we've created a set list and we're working on that before playing a show is the transitions between the songs and how that's going to sound. Is there any awkward dead space that I can feel or that someone can feel? And how, yeah, I just think making from start to finish, knowing exactly where we're going to fill space with what types of sounds is really interesting.
And actually on that as well is we're really working on how our vocal performance is gonna play off one another, and trying to find a balance there, because I think one of the strengths of the album, and something that we all kind of really agreed needed to happen, was we needed to bring Emma and Erin into the mix a bit more, because just the timbres of our three voices are all so different that they really play off each other well. And if we can, I mean, one thing I really want to get right for when we do play the launch is that vocal performance. And I think we practice. I wonder if maybe we should do something else, because I always think of that story with Weezer before they recorded the Blue album. The guy that was producing, I have no idea who it is, but he got him to do like a barbershop course, like a barbershop doo-bop is that what it's called? A barbershop quartet course. So they all kind of learned how to do a bunch of those style songs with each other, so that when they recorded the record, the harmonies were on point. And I imagine that would have like really helped their live performance as well. I mean, obviously doing that and then playing with instruments is pretty sweet. Like the Beatles did that shit for like heaps of, yeah, I really did not expect the Beatles to get a mention on this. I do not like the Beatles. Hey.
Not a Beatles fan.
I mean, I don't actively dislike
Not
them.
a hater.
No. I'm just. I mean,
It's a little overrated.
I get
right?
it. No, I get it. I get it. Put it that way. I mean, I imagine you guys have talked about the pandemic a lot already, but the one thing. So I actually went to a gig on Thursday for the first time since we played our show in March. That was the last time we'd played, and it was actually mad being in a seated venue like that. It was a hardcore show, so it was really, really weird. But I remember I saw Deaf Heaven play at the Opera House like 4 years ago for Vivid,
Completely.
like ages, and that was fully seated, and people only really stood up for the encore. So I mean, I'm not saying that every band is like Deaf Heaven that can draw a crowd, like encapsulate a crowd like that, but I think there's definitely a room for that, and especially if it's contributing to being more safe and hygienic and thoughtful about how other people are feeling about the situation that we're all in. I mean, you'd probably get that anyway with shows that we play, because inevitably it ends up drawing people that are like us. But the fact that it's seated kind of encourages people to be a bit more active in that regard, I guess. And
I think it opens the door to a new scope of billing for shows, like intersecting different types of art forms as well. That might be more akin to seating, but that you can work together with the same crowd. And like we're doing with our upcoming show, we've got Alex Reynolds, who's a stand-up comedian. She's going to be opening the night, and yeah, I think it's just going to be really fun to be able to play with different artists and different art forms in future live shows.
Yeah, that's a really good way of thinking about it as well. Being able to bring even a multimedia kind of thing to a regular rock show.
Yeah. Mix. Yeah, I mean, I love mixed bills anytime, any band, whatever. And so, like Emma said, being able to take advantage of that in a way, and make things a bit more diverse is cool. It's like a good, successful one little thing that's come from this horrible, dreadful, like situation that I can't even. I struggle to describe in words, to be honest.
So now let's circle back and talk about how shit Spotify is.
It's super shit, but it's also really, really, really useful.
Yeah.
Probably the only way a lot of people will listen to albums, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also bred this space where you kind of can only release music in a certain way. To be able to take advantage of those algorithms, because I don't mind saying take advantage of Spotify's algorithms.
Yeah.
The problem is that that approach is great, but it limits you when you're trying to build not a sound, but when you're trying to build a collection of music that you want people to listen to or that you yourself want to express, you know. It doesn't tend to always necessarily work, especially for bands like us, you know, like DIY bands that kind of carved, like bred a following and kind of got everything going through the shows and, you know, through being able to release stuff physically and handing it to people at shows and you know, occasionally because of the spaces we were playing in, you just get random people who wanted to go to a show, and so that is kind of really undermined by the way that the algorithms and stuff work. And then this last thing that they've done is crazy because a band like us would take that up because we don't get shit from Spotify in terms of money anyway. You know what I mean? So what's the difference between making $50 and making $20 if it means that we get a chance to on the algorithm wave, you know?
Rhythmed, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Playlisted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it goes to the way, because you guys did a couple of singles and then released the record, right? Like, it goes to the way you kind of actually do your rollout now as well.
Yeah, totally. Actively thinking about doing that as opposed to last time where we just really were like, yeah, let's just chuck it up and see what happens. Whereas this time I was like, I made a plan, you know, and fully tried to execute this planned release, you know, and eventually we got to a point where we were like, let's just put it out because, you know, we could wait for people to want to, to generate enough steam to be able to get someone to put it out a record for you, where it's like financially viable for you to try and recoup some of that money that you spend on recording it. Like if we wanted to wait for that to happen, it would have blown out to a point where we wouldn't have wanted to put it out anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we just kind of exactly. And because we wanted to, I guess it's in a sense I got impatient, but we kind of just got impatient with waiting for an opportunity to pop up, you know? So, and because at heart, because we're a DIY band, it's like, well, let's just roll it out. Let's just get it out there and get it sorted. And, you know, if we can whip up enough money at some point to press it, then let's look into pressing it. But it just wasn't a priority because even though we love physical music, it wasn't financially viable after recording it, you know? And that's also been affected by Spotify.
And again, we can go around the room, is what's everyone listening to at the moment?
Okay. I've been listening to this one song by the Beach Boys over and over again, Kokomo. It's stuck in my head, but it's an amazing song.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that all you've been listening to? Just one Beach Boys song?
Pretty much. Yeah, I've had a rough week.
I've given that new Touche album a spin. It's quite good. But I listen to heaps of podcasts. So one thing about not commuting much these days as well is that I haven't had a chance to listen to music in the same way that I used to. You know, I always had a routine of listening to music whenever I was on a trip somewhere, which is not a good excuse, to be honest. But yeah, I do utilize the Spotify daily mixes a lot, which, that's a whole nother thing that we could talk about, but I don't know if I want to go into it, to be honest. Spotify's
You wanna talk about-
mishandling, but
Yeah,
the
you want to talk about
those
Spotify's evil doings?
those daily mixes are really useful for me.
I've been listening to Always a lot, actually. Just that Adult Diversion album. For some reason, I've fallen into just listening to that on repeat. But other than that, I've been listening to some old Meshuggah quite a bit, like the Chaosphere album and stuff. Just, obviously just obsessed with Thomas Hake and how complicated his drums are, making rhythms sound, even just simple rhythms sound complicated, but smart in a really smart way. And I don't know, that stuff just really does it for me.
There was a burn mark on the corner of the desk. It was a side of me that I could not express. And every time I tried to understand my pain, it was a side of me that I could not explain. I was a liar. I was a liar, I could never be the one. There is a burn mark in the corner on the floor. It is a side of you I can't help but adore. And every time I try to understand your pain, it is a side of you that I cannot explain. There was a burn mark on the corner of the desk. It was a side of me that I could not express. I was a liar. I was a liar, I could never be the one. I was a liar. I was a liar, I could never be the one.
The track you just heard was Undone by Snape, taken from their latest album, Undone.
Hello, Mr. Alex.
Hello, you throwing to me for once.
Yes.
That's a bit of a change.
I know. I don't know like what to say. Like you've got some like hot little
Oh, yeah,
Things that
some
you say.
thoughts.
yeah.
What a great interview.
Yeah.
We'll start there.
Yeah.
A really, really great bunch of people, pretty happy. Like
Yeah,
like
all
Emma,
really positive, right?
Yeah, like Emma said, like a big happy family.
Yeah.
That was really good.
That is the good vibes.
Yeah. I mean, a few things to take out of that. I guess the first one for me was how they, consciously thought about the recording process in a way to be able to translate that into the live show, where I feel putting that conscious thought in to be like, oh, how are we going to perform these songs in a live setting, as opposed to there are some bands out there, I won't name names, but I feel like with some bands, it's just like, okay, we're going to put all this time and effort and layers into the album, and the live show is almost, it's a separate thing. It's
Like completely separate.
yeah,
The
exactly.
songs
The
aren't
live show,
gonna be
yeah,
the same.
exactly right. Exactly.
Or we're using backing tracks or something.
Yeah,
like that,
exactly. You know, and I mean, horses for courses, but I really like that Snape, have made that conscious effort into writing I don't know if around the performance aspect of it a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, that's really interesting as well in terms of not, because it's only a 4-piece as well. There is really only so much you can do in a live setting, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
You've got one guitarist, one keyboard, one bass, and one drums. So you've got to kind of work out. You don't want to overdo it in terms of like what's on the recorded material.
Totally.
Because then, you're going to get to a live setting and the song's just not going to hold up right.
No, exactly right.
And you don't want to be relying on parts that don't exist.
Yep. That's a great way to put it, actually.
But I think the production on the album is really amazing.
Oh, totally.
Just the space is one of the big things that I took away from it, and the tone as well. All the guitar tones, great. All the vocal tones, they sit perfectly.
You touched on it a little bit there in the interview, but the mix is fantastic. Everything like breathes really well.
Yeah, it's all about that kind of space, right?
And I think Emma talked about it a bit. The keys. Finding
really cut through.
Yeah, exactly. Everything has its own like really well-defined place.
Yeah. I think it's interesting in terms of like the genre as well.
Yeah.
I think like they were talking about like how the organ was the big key sound originally, but now it's that kind of synthetic sound.
Yeah.
And I think, that works really well. It is very bright up front. And it's not just kind of like that mellow, not that is bad in any way, to kind of have the organ sitting back and being like a textural layer in a way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But with the synth, it kind of, like the first time I heard it, I was a bit like, ooh. You know? Yeah.
It's very bright.
It's very bright.
And to have that kind of jammed up against some, overdriven guitars and that kind of thing,
It really stands out. And for me, anyway, something a bit different, It's like, oh, that's nice. It's a nice change,
Yeah. And it's, that kind of, in a way, like Cam said, he's kind of reliving the punk days by rewriting those old title fight riffs and that kind of thing, But like it's, the aesthetic completely changes once you've got the synth on top of it.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. On that kind of the hardcore punk days, I love how that sort of that DIY ethos is carried through into the band. Yeah. And I think they do a really good job.
Yeah, exactly.
As a band.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we've played with them before in the past, and it's great. Like Cam got up and did the sound while we were doing it. Kind of took turns doing sound. It is that you kind of like you and I both came out of that hardcore scene.
Punk. Yeah.
And you just remember like all the times where you had to go to the show.
Yep.
And you had to set all the shit up.
Yep.
And you had to be the sound guy, or you had to provide the full back line, and your bass gear was up on stage.
Sharing amps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can borrow my amp, my guitar. It's just the way it was.
Hey man, 6 set.
Yeah.
And no, and it's like, it's really good to see that kind of thing just carry on through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just that energy, I guess, or that ethos, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just still going. And I don't know.
Long may it live.
Yeah. Long may it live. Just had this passion. Yeah.
Exactly. Passion for it, passion for the craft, passion for playing shows as well. And then passion for recording too. I think it's really amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So is that about it?
I think so. Unless you have anything you wanted to dive into.
I thought that was a great interview.
Yeah, totally.
Really happy that we got to speak to really the majority of the band as well. It's good to get everyone's input on how they each kind of think about the music as well.
Yeah, I totally. And that's another thing we could talk about, I guess, is, in most, well, a lot of bands, but for Snape as well, it kind of picked up, everyone sort of has a different musical background. You know? Emma was saying she's like classically trained, whereas Cam came from
punks.
Like punks. Yeah, and it's just really cool to see all that come together in the way it does.
Yeah, exactly. And it all blends into their beautiful musical happy family.
Yeah.
Well, nice. I want to thank Cam, Emma, and Jimmy for coming on the show, talking to us. That was a great interview. And thank you, the listener, for listening.
Yeah.
This is Cassette Connection. You can listen to it on any podcasting platform. If you haven't, please press subscribe. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you can review. And you can check out the YouTube channel or just hit subscribe and tell your friends. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Farewell.
Bye.
Cassette Connection is recorded and produced by Ben Harb and Alex Ferrugia. For more information, head to our website, cassetteconnection.com.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cassette Connection. And if you would like to be featured or just want to get in touch, our email is contact@cassetteconnection.com.